Only those who listen until the very end will grasp the full horror that awaits, and I promise it will haunt every corner of your mind. The first night in her new apartment, Emily felt a thrill of excitement. Everything smelled clean, new paint on the walls, polished wooden floors, and big windows letting in the city lights. She unpacked quietly, imagining how peaceful her nights would be here. But as the clock struck midnight, something shifted. A soft creaking echoed across the empty room. Emily froze, listening. At first, she told herself it was the building settling. Old apartments made noises. Then she heard it again, a faint, dragging sound, like someone pacing slowly outside her bedroom door. Her heart started to race. She shook her head. "It's just my imagination," she whispered to herself. But the next sound was different. A low, almost playful giggle came from the hallway. Emily's blood ran cold. She tiptoed toward the living room, trying to convince herself no one was there. The apartment was empty, yet the sounds continued, soft whispers, subtle footsteps, tiny knocks against the walls. She turned every corner, her palms sweating, eyes scanning shadows that seemed to move on their own. Hours passed. Every time she sat down, a noise started again. A whisper close to her ear, a knock on the window, a soft thump from the ceiling above. Emily hugged herself, pulling her blanket tightly. She tried to sleep, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined shapes in the corners, tall, dark, almost human, but not quite. Then came the sound that made her stomach drop, scraping. Long, slow scratches against the wooden floor, right by her bed. She opened her eyes slowly, every muscle frozen. At the edge of her vision, she saw it. A shadow, darker than the night itself, standing silently by her bed. Emily's breath caught. She blinked. When she looked again, the shape had moved slightly. It wasn't fully visible yet, but she could make out thin, spindly fingers dragging across the floor, long nails catching the dim light. A whisper rose above her, soft, mocking. "I'm here." Emily tried to scream, but her voice was stuck. The shadow shifted closer, and she finally saw a glimpse of its face. Huge, gaping eyes wide open, completely white. Blood ran from its mouth, its tongue a deep red, teeth jagged and terrifying. The shape was not human. The closer it came, the more impossible it looked, and Emily's mind screamed for her to wake up. The moment her voice returned, she shouted, "Who are you? What do you want?" The shadow froze, tilting its head unnaturally, its limbs moving in jerky, inhuman ways. Then, in a blink, it vanished. The room was silent again, but Emily couldn't breathe. She hugged her knees, staring at the spot it had stood, wondering if she was truly awake, or if her nightmare had only begun. The next night, the noises started again. Only this time, they weren't just whispers. Emily barely slept that night. Every time her eyes closed, she felt the apartment watching her. By morning, her nerves were shredded. She tried to convince herself it was exhaustion, the stress of moving, or even too many scary stories she'd read. But the apartment had a presence, one she couldn't ignore. The second night, she sat on her bed, listening. At first, everything was quiet. Then a soft whisper slithered across the room. "Emily." It was barely audible, like someone breathing her name from the corner. Her hands shook, pulling the blanket tighter around her. She got up, slowly, trying to locate the source. The living room was empty. The kitchen, too. Every shadow seemed to stretch unnaturally, crawling along the walls like dark fingers reaching for her. Emily's pulse thumped in her ears. She turned back to her bedroom and froze. A figure appeared in the doorway, or maybe it wasn't there before. Thin, pale, almost translucent, with eyes that reflected nothing. It moved without a sound, gliding over the floor as if it didn't belong to the laws of gravity. Emily wanted to scream, but her body wouldn't obey. Then came the laughter. Soft, high-pitched, wrong. Not human. It echoed through the apartment, bouncing off the walls, surrounding her. The lights flickered. Emily's phone slipped from her hands. She tried to reach for it, but the figure vanished. Minutes passed in silence. She waited, heart hammering. And then she heard it. A slow, deliberate scratching near the window. The curtains swayed slightly, though there was no breeze. Emily approached, trembling. The sound stopped as she reached the window, leaving only silence. Suddenly, another whisper, closer now. "Why are you here?" The voice was almost friendly, almost human, but wrong. Emily spun around. Nothing. Shadows stretched across the room, forming shapes that weren't quite human. Tall, thin, fingers too long, faces too wide, smiles too large. Her mind tried to make sense, but every instinct screamed danger. Then, from the corner of her room, she saw movement. Something crouched low to the floor, almost invisible in the dark. It rose slowly, unnaturally, stretching like it wasn't meant to bend that way. Emily stumbled back, tripping over the rug. The shadow halted, tilting its head, watching her with eyes that glowed faintly white. Emily's voice finally came out, shaky and loud. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The thing hissed softly, a sound like nails across a chalkboard, and in a flash, it disappeared. Emily fell to the floor, curling up, unable to stop shaking. Her apartment, her safe space, was no longer hers. Something lived there, something that watched, something that wouldn't leave. That night, Emily didn't sleep at all. And when she finally drifted, the whisper came again, "You're not alone." The third night arrived, and Emily couldn't convince herself to stay in the living room. She pulled her blanket tight and sat in bed, staring at the dark corners of her apartment. Every creak, every sigh of the building made her jump. But tonight felt different, heavier, like the shadows were pressing closer, watching her every move. Around midnight, a faint sound made her flinch, a slow, deliberate tapping, coming from the floor near her bed. Emily's breath caught. She stayed perfectly still, heart hammering, every nerve on edge. "It's just my imagination," she whispered. But the sound continued, slow, rhythmic, almost like claws dragging across wood. She dared to look down. At first, the room seemed empty. But then, from the corner of her eye, she noticed a dark figure moving just beyond her bed. Its limbs were twisted, unnaturally long. Emily froze. Every instinct screamed to run, but her body refused. The figure didn't move like a human. It glided, its thin fingers scraping against the wooden floor, making that horrifying scratching sound. A whisper, soft yet sharp, brushed her ear. "You can't hide." Emily gasped and stumbled backward, almost falling. She grabbed her phone, shining the light toward the figure. For a moment, the room was empty. But when her eyes adjusted, it had moved, closer, looming at the foot of her bed. Its face was grotesque. Large, wide-open eyes, completely white. Its mouth stretched in a terrifying grin, teeth jagged and wet with blood. Its tongue, bright red, flicked unnaturally as it tilted its head. The sight was so inhuman, so unnatural, that Emily's stomach twisted in fear. Her scream caught in her throat. She clawed at the blanket, trying to shield herself. The figure took a step closer, and Emily realized it wasn't just standing. It was mimicking human movements, but wrong. Each motion was jerky, unpredictable, like a broken puppet. Its nails scraped against the bed frame, creating a sound that made her teeth chatter. Her mind spun. This can't be real. Suddenly, it leaned closer. Emily felt its cold presence brush her arm. She screamed, louder this time. The entity froze, tilting its head, then vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Silence engulfed the room. Emily collapsed to the floor, shaking uncontrollably, staring at the space it had occupied. Hours passed. Her apartment remained eerily quiet. But Emily knew it wasn't gone. The scratches, whispers, laughter, they were all still inside, waiting. Every shadow now felt like a potential threat. Her sanctuary had become a cage. By the fourth night, Emily had stopped sleeping. She barely moved from her bed, clutching the blanket around her, listening to every creak, every whisper. She could no longer convince herself that this was imagination. Something was in the apartment, something patient, something that waited. Around midnight, a low, chilling sound filled the room, a soft, almost human-like breathing. Emily's eyes darted to the dark corner near the closet. There, two tiny points of white gleamed. Eyes. Wide, blank, unblinking. She froze, unable to breathe. Her chest tightened as if the darkness itself had pressed against it. A faint scratching started again, closer this time. It circled the room, moving with purpose. Emily's mind raced. If I move, it will see me. If I stay still, maybe it will leave. But the eyes didn't blink. They followed her every twitch. Then came the whisper. A voice, soft, sinister, curling around her mind. "You shouldn't have come here." Emily's heart hammered. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped. The creature stepped out from the shadows, revealing more of its twisted form. Its limbs were too long, bent at impossible angles. The mouth stretched wider than a human jaw could, teeth sharp and slick. Its tongue flicked, tasting the air, tasting fear. Emily's eyes went wide. Every instinct screamed to run, but her legs refused. The thing tilted its head, jerking unnaturally as it circled the bed, watching her like a predator stalking prey. Each movement was wrong, human yet not, graceful yet broken, horrifying to imagine. She tried to move her phone closer, using the flashlight. The light flickered weakly. The thing froze mid-step. Its gaze locked onto her. Emily's throat tightened. She finally shouted, voice cracking. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The entity hissed, a sound between a growl and a whisper, scraping its claws along the floor. Then it moved suddenly, fast, too fast for the eye to follow, toward the door. It disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. Emily collapsed, shaking violently, tears streaming down her face. She stayed awake the rest of the night, listening. Every floorboard creak, every soft whisper made her flinch. She couldn't tell if it had left or was simply waiting, just beyond the reach of her sight. The apartment no longer felt like home. It was a cage, and she was the only prisoner by the fifth night. Emily had stopped pretending she could ignore it. She didn't sleep. She didn't leave her apartment. Every shadow felt alive. Every whisper was a threat. The city outside continued its normal hum, unaware of the horror inside apartment 4B. Around midnight, she felt it before she saw it. A cold pressure in the room, like the air itself had weight. The soft dragging sound began again, long, deliberate scratches across the floor near her bed. Emily's chest tightened. She held her breath, praying it wouldn't come closer. Then she heard it, a whisper so close it seemed to crawl along her skin. "I'm here." The words wrapped around her mind, filling her thoughts with panic. She turned slowly, heart pounding. In the corner of the room, she saw it fully now. A figure crouched low, unnaturally thin, limbs bent in impossible angles. Its eyes were huge and completely white, reflecting the dim moonlight from the window. Its mouth opened wide, larger than humanly possible, saliva dripping like red ribbons. Emily stumbled backward, her hands scrabbling for the blanket. She screamed, finally letting the sound rip through the apartment. The thing froze for a heartbeat, tilting its head unnaturally, then moved closer. Its movement wasn't human. It jerked, twisted, gliding over the floor like a broken marionette, claws scraping against the wood. Suddenly, a laugh, high-pitched, wrong, echoing off the walls, filled the room. Emily's stomach churned. She tried to shine her phone at it, but the figure was gone. Then, out of the shadows, a soft whisper came, almost playful. "Why do you scream? You invited me." Emily's mind spun. "I didn't invite this. I can't be imagining this." The entity appeared again, now near her window. It pressed a thin, long finger against the glass, tracing patterns in the condensation, almost like it was playing a game. She noticed its nails scratched faint lines into the wooden floor, the marks glowing faintly red. Her phone slipped from her hands again. She scrambled to grab it, but her limbs trembled uncontrollably. The entity leaned closer to her, tilting its head, moving with jerky, broken motions, each one unnatural. Its wide-open eyes and jagged teeth reflected a cruel curiosity, a fascination with her fear. Emily couldn't stop crying or screaming, trapped between terror and disbelief. Then, in a heartbeat, it vanished. Silence fell like a blanket over the room. Emily's knees hit the floor. She hugged herself tightly, sobbing. Her apartment, once a safe haven, had become a prison with an invisible jailer. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't escape. The sixth night was worse than anything Emily had imagined. She didn't sleep. She barely moved from her bed, clutching the blanket tightly, ears straining for every sound. The apartment was alive with whispers, scratches, and soft, jerky footsteps. She knew it was waiting. Patient, calculating, inevitable. Around midnight, a cold presence filled the room. Emily felt it before she saw it. A weight pressing down, shadows bending unnaturally around her bed. A scraping sound began, slow and deliberate, climbing from the wooden floor to the walls, like the creature had legs she couldn't see, moving impossibly. Then came the whisper, sharp and grating. "Do you want to see me?" Emily froze. Every instinct screamed to stay still, but her heart was a drumbeat of terror. She didn't answer. The whisper came again, closer, curling around her mind. I am here, Emily. I've always been here. Suddenly, she felt the brush of air, like cold fingers running along her arm. She forced herself to look toward her bedroom corner. The creature stood there, fully visible for the first time. Its body was impossibly thin, limbs twisting in unnatural angles. Its face, Emily's stomach knotted, was the most horrifying thing she had ever seen. Large, gaping eyes, blood streaking from its mouth, tongue bright red, teeth jagged and uneven. Its movements were jerky, broken, inhuman, yet strangely mimicking human curiosity. Emily screamed, voice cracking, the sound bouncing off the walls. The thing leaned closer, tilting its head, letting out a low, rasping laugh. It reached forward with long, clawed fingers. She recoiled, curling into herself, tears streaming down her face. Then, the room shifted. Shadows stretched unnaturally, corners twisting, the apartment seeming to grow taller, darker. The creature vanished from view, only to appear on her dresser, then by the window, then beside her bed, all in an instant. Each time, it whispered, laughed, or scratched the floor, driving Emily closer to panic. She realized something horrifying. This entity didn't just exist in the apartment. It could move through space faster than the eye could follow. It was everywhere at once. Emily screamed for help, but the city outside remained silent, unaware. She was alone with something impossible, something meant to haunt the deepest corners of her mind. Suddenly, the creature froze. Its head tilted sharply, like it had noticed something. Emily's gaze followed, and she saw movement in the hallway behind her bedroom door. Another shadow. Not the same one, but similar. White, wide eyes, jagged mouth, impossible limbs. Emily's mind shattered. The apartment was full of them. She wasn't safe anywhere. Then, the whispers overlapped, creating a chorus of voices. You can't leave. You belong to us now. Emily's vision blurred, panic overtaking her completely. Her knees hit the floor. She tried to scream again, but no sound came out. Finally, the last thing she saw before darkness overtook her, the creature standing inches from her face, tilting its head unnaturally, eyes locked on hers, smiling in a way that promised she would never sleep peacefully again. The next morning, the apartment was silent. Emily was gone. But if you visit 4B, the lights flicker at midnight, and some tenants whisper of faint scratching and laughter, and white, staring eyes watching from the corners. If you enjoyed this horror story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell icon for more terrifying stories.